Good morning from our sun-drenched Costa del Sol and welcome to Life in Spain News, my little YouTube channel where I attempt to bring you Spain-related news, be it local, national or international based. Now, before I get started, I'll do the usual thanks to everybody who's liked my videos, subscribed to my channel, and of course those who've taken the time to write a comment. I do enjoy reading your comments, so please always leave a comment because I will always try to get back to you. Right, over to today's topic, and today I thought I'd do something slightly different and keep it news-based, but give you a bit more of an opinion piece. Now, I was, over the last couple of days, I've been looking for news stories to cover for this channel, and I decided to take a different slant at this and delved into the UK press to find out if there's anything Spain-related there. Now, we all know the UK press is very hit and miss, and depending on what publication you're reading, I was quite shocked at a story that seemed to have a theme running across the board, and that is how Spain is struggling and various areas are empty and are short of tourists. Of course, we've all heard of the tourist protests here and other things like that, but for the UK press to run hard on this angle that Spain is struggling with its tourism because of lack of Brits is a quite ridiculous one, in fact. Of course, several areas of Spain may be suffering slightly more than previous years. Very reported that places like Mallorca or the Costa del Sol are slightly down. But in general, tourism is set to be a bumper year again, and Spain is set to overtake France as the #1 tourist destination in the world. Right, so I decided to have a little delve into this and look into why these stories exist. Now, of course, everybody who follows the Spanish news here will know of the tourist protests and the struggle here for the local people who struggle to make ends meet as the cost of living goes up and lack of housing. Now, if we take the Costa del Sol as a good example where I've lived for 2 decades, things down here have most definitely changed since I arrived in 2002. I would say the Costa del Sol in general is a lot nicer than it used to be and has been a lot more modernised, be it through the EU funding to make the roads and infrastructure better, down to the type of restaurant and bar we are now seeing opened. When I arrived here, it was a little bit of a British ghetto here on the Costa del Sol, and at times it had me with my head in my hands and despairing the fact that I was a Brit. In fact, I remember opening my bar and trying to be a little bit different and often telling people that I was an Australian over a Brit because I was quite horrified by what was going on around me. The days of bars showing advertising Emmerdale Farm, Coronation Street and EastEnders, thank goodness, have long disappeared, as have the culture of karaoke bars everywhere. Of course, there is a time and place for karaoke, but now these places are limited to certain areas and are much more controlled than before. Now, in my personal opinion, maybe what we're seeing here now is a change of the Spanish tourism model. Now, this has been something that has been a big debate here, probably since COVID, and when Spain suffered from its lack of international tourism. Of course, Spain wants international tourism and will always obtain it, especially with the wonderful climate here and wonderful things culturally to see. What I do think has happened here is there's now a different type of tourism. During COVID itself, we did lack in international tourism and a lot of businesses did suffer. But a lot of those businesses did have a bit of a rethink and decide to remodel themselves more towards the locals and the Spanish nationals, who tend to holiday just as much in the holiday resorts as a lot of the international ones. Of course, Spain has no desire to stop international tourism, but what maybe we're seeing now is a relook at their tourist model, with more emphasis on the cities all over the country, different areas, and moving away from the kind of Brit bar party package holiday thing we've often seen over the years, which Spain has always been famous for. Even areas like Magaluf and Benidorm, which over the years have been quite famous and caught a lot of press attention here for the way that the tourists do take over and how it does affect the locals. Now, these kind of places now seem to be, let's say, softening out and cramping down on bad behaviour. So much so, they want the places to be more family orientated. Now, where I am, the Costa del Sol, I live in a very family orientated city where it tends to be families and beach holidays. And the atmosphere here is generally pretty good. So you can see that's the kind of model that people would like to move towards. Now, when you often talk about tourism in Spain, people often only think of beach holidays. But Spain itself is a most wonderful country with various things to visit. Now, when I was doing these videos with Dan, we did a video on places to visit in Spain, and it just shows you how wonderful this country is. From the great coastline up in Galicia to great cities like San Sebastian, Bilbao up in the Basque Country, to big cities like Madrid and Barcelona, to cultural places like Seville and Malaga and Granada. This country has so much to offer. Even things like the Camino de Santiago is a huge tourist attraction here, and it couldn't be further from the beach-style tourism we see down here on the Costa del Sol and area. So these stories, I feel, by the UK press aren't really justified and don't pick up the full picture. Because once again, Spain is set to overtake France and become the world's #1 tourist destination. So they must be doing something right. I, for one, hope they can change their tourist model, because we want people to come here to enjoy Spain for its food, for its culture, and also for its wonderful climate. If that is sustainable is another matter, and if Spain will stop chasing the cheap euro, the cheap money, we'll be it to see. But with various package holidays now being more expensive before, and alternatives in other parts of Europe being cheaper, maybe they are a thing of the past. Now, what I'm going to talk about now is something that I saw online. Now, I do follow a lot of pages on Instagram and Facebook, Spain related, to pick up news. And I did come across this bizarre thing here, that the scientists claim that a summer in Spain boosts happiness by 95%. Now, I would question that completely, because we're now in September here, and I can't tell you how happy the local people are, and the people I know here now, that August and the summer is basically over. Yes, we're having some high temperatures still, and we still require air conditioning at certain times of day. But down here in the south, things couldn't be more different than they were 2 weeks ago. Because what people won't realize here is August here can be absolute hell, especially if you live here, because you can't park your car, the supermarkets are packed, difficult to get into a restaurant, the beaches are full, the noise levels are incredible, the Airbnbs are full, and noise pollution is everywhere. So for scientists to say, or this article to suggest, that a summer in Spain boosts your happiness by 95%, I find a lot of people would beg to differ. In fact, I was out with a fan of on the channel, Marcus, and we was talking about how much we enjoy living here through the winter. And the winter here, as I've said before, is the most wonderful time. If anybody's thinking about coming on holiday, especially down to the Costa del Sol, I would really recommend May, the end of September, beginning of October, because the weather here is still pleasant enough, being in its mid-20s, with the nights being cool enough that you no longer need air conditioning. There's still enough people around that gives the place an atmosphere, but a different type of tourism. With a lot of the kids going back to school, it's more adult crowd, and restaurants, although busy, are still are open. It's always been a mystery to me here how a lot of places shut up through the winter, where there is such there is a potential here for tourism. And I wish the Spanish government would, or the local governments here, would try and push the winter tourism, because I do live here for basically October through to May. I could, given June, July and August, I would personally like to ditch, and if I had my way, I would live somewhere else in those 3 months. And finally, as they would say on the News of 10, I'd like to bring you more animal-related news. Unfortunately, I have no more updates on the wild boar, but what I do have you is a fisherman's tale and something a little bit different. Now, there's all sorts of wildlife and things like that in the sea here, and you at certain times of year, you can even spot orca whales, sharks, jellyfish, and other things. But this fisherman, I don't think, was expecting to catch what he caught, because when he brought in his line, he hooked himself a rat. Now, yes, there are rats here. The Costa del Sol, where I live, is unfortunately full of it. And we've had a bit of a plague of recently, not so much so that they're likely to wander in your house. But there's been a lot of video footage recently of rats on the beach. Now, of course, these rats will hide in rocks and things like that, where things are washed up on the shore. But this fisherman did get a bit of a shock when he hooked one, as you can see by this footage. Right, there you go. That's a bit of different content today. I thought I would give you a bit of opinion. And in my next video, I will go back to my usual news format, because there's plenty to talk about at the moment. once again, more Spain-Israel news included. Right, have yourselves a lovely day. I'll speak to you soon, and thanks for watching.